Chapter 16. The Dying of the Dragons. Rhaenyra Triumphant. Even as King's Landing fell to Rhaenyra Targaryen and her dragons, Prince Aemond and Sir Criston Cole were advancing on Harrenhal, whilst the Lannister host under Adrian Tarbeck swept eastward. At Acorn Hall the Westermen were checked briefly when Lord Joseph Smallwood sallied forth to join Lord Piper and the remnants of his defeated host, but Piper died in the battle that ensued, felled when his heart burst at the sight of his favorite grandson's head upon a spear, Mushroom says, and Smallwood fell back inside his castle. A second battle followed 3 days later, when the Rivermen regrouped under a hedge knight named Sir Harry Penny. This unlikely hero died soon after, whilst slaying Adrian Tarbeck. Once more the Lannisters prevailed, cutting down the Rivermen as they fled. When the western host resumed its march to Harrenhal, it was under the aged Lord Humphrey Lefford, who had suffered so many wounds that he commanded from a litter. Little did Lord Lefford suspect that he would soon face a stiffer test, for an army of fresh foes was descending on them from the north. 2,000 savage Northmen, flying Queen Rhaenyra's quartered banners. At their head rode the Lord of Barrowton, Roderick Dustin, a warrior so old and hoary men called him Roddy the Ruin. His host was made up of grizzled graybeards in old mail and ragged skins, every man a seasoned warrior, every man a horse. They called themselves the Winter Wolves. "We have come to die for the Dragon Queen," Lord Roderick announced at the Twins, when Lady Sabitha Frey rode out to greet them. Meanwhile, muddy roads and rainstorms slowed the pace of Aemond's advance, for his host was made up largely of foot, with a long baggage train. Sir Criston's vanguard fought and won a short, sharp battle against Sir Oswald Woden in the Lord's Dairy en route on the lakeshore, but met no other opposition. After 19 days on the march, they reached Harrenhal. And found the castle gates open, with Prince Daemon and all his people gone. Prince Aemond had kept Vigar with the main column throughout the march, thinking that his uncle might attempt to attack them on Caraxes. He reached Harrenhal a day after Cole, and that night celebrated a great victory. Daemon and his river scum had fled rather than face his wrath, Aemond proclaimed. Small wonder then that when word of the fall of King's Landing reached him, the prince felt thrice the fool. His fury was fearsome to behold. First to suffer for it was Sir Simon Strong. Prince Aemond had no love for any of that ilk, and the haste with which the Castellan had yielded Harrenhal to Daemon Targaryen convinced him the old man was a traitor. Sir Simon protested his innocence, insisting that he was a true and loyal servant of the crown. His own great-nephew, Larrys Strong, was Lord of Harrenhal and King Aegon's Master of Whisperers, he reminded the Prince Regent. These denials only inflamed Aemond's suspicions. The clubfoot was a traitor as well, he decided. How else would Daemon and Rhaenyra have known when King's Landing was most vulnerable? Someone on the small council had sent word to them. And Larry's clubfoot was Breakbones' brother, and thus an uncle to Rhaenyra's bastards. Aemond commanded that Sir Simon be given a sword. "Let the gods decide if you speak truly," he said. "If you are innocent, the warrior will give you the strength to defeat me." The duel that followed was utterly one-sided, all the accounts agree. The prince cut the old man to pieces, then fed his corpse to Vigar. Nor did Sir Simon's grandsons long outlive him. One by one, every man and boy with strong blood in his veins was dragged forth and put to death, until the heap made of their heads stood 3 feet tall. Thus did the flower of House Strong, an ancient line of noble warriors boasting descent from the first men, come to an ignoble end in the ward at Harrenhal. No trueborn Strong was spared, nor any bastard save, oddly. Ali's rivers. Though the wet nurse was twice his age thrice, if we put our trust in Mushroom, Prince Aemond had taken her into his bed as a prize of war soon after taking Harrenhal, seemingly preferring her to all the other women of the castle, including many pretty maids of his own years. West of Harrenhal, fighting continued in the Riverlands as the Lannister host slogged onward. The age and infirmity of their commander, Lord Lefford, had slowed their march to a crawl, but as they neared the western shores of the God's Eye, they found a huge new army athwart their path. Roddy the Ruin and his Winter Wolves had joined with Forrest Frey, Lord of the Crossing, and Red Rob Rivers, known as the Bowmen of Raventry. The Northmen numbered 2,000, Frey commanded 200 knights and thrice as many foot, Rivers brought 300 archers to the fray. And scarce had Lord Lefford halted to confront the foe in front of him when more enemies appeared to the south, where Longleaf the Leonslayer and a ragged band of survivors from the earlier battles had been joined by the Lords Biglestone, Chambers, and Purin. Caught between these two foes, Lefford hesitated to move against either, for fear of the other falling on his rear. Instead he put his back to the lake, dug in, and sent ravens to Prince Aemond at Harrenhal, begging his aid. Though a dozen birds took wing, not one ever reached the prince. Red Rob Rivers, said to be the finest archer in all Westeros, took them down on the wing. More rivermen turned up the next day, led by Sir Garibald Grey, Lord John Charlton, and the new Lord of Raventry, the 11-year-old Benjicot Blackwood. With their numbers augmented by these fresh levies, the Queen's men agreed that the time had come to attack. Best make an end to these lions before the dragons come, said Roddy the Ruin. The bloodiest land battle of the Dance of the Dragons began the next day, with the rising of the sun. In the annals of the Citadel it is known as the Battle by the Lakeshore, but to those men who lived to tell of it, it was always the fishfeed. Attacked from three sides, the Westermen were driven back foot by foot into the waters of the God's Eye. Hundreds died there, cut down whilst fighting in the reeds, hundreds more drowned as they tried to flee. By nightfall 2,000 men were dead, amongst them many notables, including Lord Frey, Lord Lefford, Lord Biglestone, Lord Charlton, Lord Swift, Lord Rain, Sir Clarent Crakehall, and Sir Emery Hill, the bastard of Lannisport. The Lannister host was shattered and slaughtered, but at such cost that young Ben Blackwood, the boy lord of Raventry, wept when he saw the heaps of the dead. The most grievous losses were suffered by the Northmen, for the Winter Wolves had begged the honor of leading the attack, and had charged 5 times into the ranks of Lannister spears. More than 2/3 of the men who had ridden south with Lord Dustin were dead or wounded. Fighting continued elsewhere in the realm as well, though those clashes were smaller than the great battle by the God's Eye. In the Reach, Lord Hightower and his ward, Prince Darren the Daring, continued to win victories, enforcing the submission of the Rowans of Goldengrove, the Oakhearts of Old Oak, and the Lords of the Shield Islands, for none dared face Tessarion, the Blue Queen. Lord Boros Baratheon called his banners and assembled near 6,000 men at Storm's End, with the avowed intent of marching on King's Landing, only to lead them south into the mountains instead. His lordship used the pretext of Dornish incursions into the Stormlands to justify this, but many and more were heard to whisper that it was the dragons ahead, not the Dornishmen behind, that prompted his change of heart. Out in the Sunset Sea, the longships of the Red Kraken fell upon Fair Isle, sweeping from one end of the island to the other whilst Lord Farman sheltered behind his walls sending out pleas for help that never came. At Harrenhal, Aemon Targaryen and Criston Cole debated how best to answer the Queen's attacks. Though Black Heron's seat was too strong to be taken by storm, and the Riverlords dared not lay siege for fear of Vhagar, the king's men were running short of food and fodder, and losing men and horses to hunger and sickness. Only blackened fields and burned villages remained within sight of the castle's massive walls, and those foraging parties that ventured farther did not return. Sir Criston urged a withdrawal to the south, where Aegon's support was strongest, but the prince refused, saying, "Only a craven runs from traitors." The loss of King's Landing and the Iron Throne had enraged him, and when word of the fishfeed reached Harrenhal, the Lord Protector had almost strangled the squire who delivered the news. Only the intercession of his bedmate Alys Rivers had saved the boy's life. Prince Aemon favored an immediate attack upon King's Landing. None of the Queen's dragons were a match for Vhagar, he insisted. Sir Criston called that folly. 1 against 6 is a fight for fools, my prince, he declared. Let them march south, he urged once more, and join their strength to Lord Hightower's. Prince Aemon could reunite with his brother Darren and his dragon. King Aegon had escaped Rhaenyra's grasp, this they knew, surely he would reclaim Sunfire and join his brothers. And perhaps their friends inside the city might find a way to free Queen Helaena as well, so she could bring Dreamfire to the battle. 4 dragons could perhaps prevail against 6, if one was Vhagar. Prince Aemon refused to consider this craven course. As regent for his brother, he might have commanded the hand's obedience, yet he did not. Munkin says that this was because of his respect for the older man, whilst Mushroom suggests that the two men had become rivals for the affections of the wet nurse Alys Rivers, who had used love potions and philtres to inflame their passions. Septon Eustace echoes the dwarf in part, but says it was Aemond alone who had become besotted with the Rivers woman, to such an extent that he could not bear the thought of leaving her. Whatever the reason, Sir Criston and Prince Aemon decided to part ways. Cole would take command of their host and lead them south to join Ormond Hightower and Prince Darren, but the Prince Regent would not accompany them. Instead he meant to fight his own war, raining fire on the traitors from the air. Soon or late, the bitch queen would send a dragon or two out to stop him, and Vhagar would destroy them. She dare not send all her dragons, Aemond insisted. That would leave King's Landing naked and vulnerable. Nor will she risk Syrax, or that last sweet son of hers. Rhaenyra may call herself a queen, but she has a woman's parts, a woman's faint heart, and a mother's fears. And thus did the Kingmaker and the Kinslayer part, each to his own fate, whilst at the Red Keep Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen set about rewarding her friends and inflicting savage punishments on those who had served her half-brother. Sir Luther Largent, commander of the Gold Cloaks, was ennobled. Sir Laurent Marbrand was installed as Lord Commander of the Queensguard, and charged with finding 6 worthy knights to serve beside him. Grand Maester Orwyle was sent to the dungeons, and Her Grace wrote the Citadel to inform them that her leal servant Gerardes was henceforth the only true Grand Maester. Freed from those same dungeons that swallowed Orwyle, the surviving Black Lords and Knights were rewarded with lands, offices, and honors. Huge rewards were posted for information leading to the capture of the usurper styling himself Aegon II, his daughter, Jaehaera, his son Maelor, the false knights, Willis Fell and Rickard Thorne, and Larys Strong the Clubfoot. When that failed to produce the desired result, Her Grace sent forth hunting parties of Knights Inquisitor to seek after the traitors and villains who had escaped her, and punish any man found to have assisted them. Queen Alicent was fettered at wrist and ankle with golden chains, though her stepdaughter spared her life, for the sake of our father, who loved you once. Her own father was less fortunate. Sir Otto Hightower, who had served 3 kings as hand, was the first traitor to be beheaded. Ironrod followed him to the block, still insisting that by law a king's son must come before his daughter. Sir Tywland Lannister was given to the torturers instead, in hopes of recovering some of the crown's treasure. Lords Rosby and Stokeworth, blacks who had gone green to avoid the dungeons, attempted to turn black again, but the Queen declared that faithless friends were worse than foes and ordered their lying tongues be removed before their executions. Their deaths left her with a nettlesome problem of succession, however. As it happened, each of the faithless friends left a daughter. Rosby's was a maid of 12, Stokeworth's a girl of 6. Prince Daemon proposed that the former be wed to Hardhugh the blacksmith's son, who had taken to calling himself Hugh Hammer, the latter to Ulf the Sot, now simply Ulf White, keeping their lands black whilst suitably rewarding the Seeds for their valor in battle. But the Queen's hand argued against this, for both girls had younger brothers. Rhaenyra's own claim to the Iron Throne was a special case. The Sea Snake insisted her father had named her as his heir. Lords Rosby and Stokeworth had done no such thing. Disinheriting their sons in favor of their daughters would overturn centuries of law and precedent, and call into question the rights of scores of other lords throughout Westeros whose own claims might be seen as inferior to those of elder sisters. It was fear of losing the support of such lords, Monken asserts in True Telling, that led the Queen to decide in favor of Lord Corlys rather than Prince Daemon. The lands, castles, and coin of houses Rosby and Stokeworth were awarded to the sons of the 2 executed lords, whilst Hugh Hammer and Ulf White were knighted and granted small holdings on the Isle of Driftmark. Mushroom tells us that Hammer celebrated by beating one of the Queen's household knights to death in a brothel on the Street of Silk when the 2 men quarreled over the maidenhood of a young virgin, whilst White rode drunkenly through the alleys of Flea Bottom, clad in naught but his golden spurs. These are the sorts of tales that Mushroom loves to tell, and their veracity cannot be ascertained. But beyond a doubt, the people of King's Landing soon grew to despise both of the Queen's new-made knights. Even less loved, if that be possible, was the man Her Grace chose as her Lord Treasurer and Master of Coin, her longtime supporter Bartimos Celtigar, Lord of Claw Isle. Lord Celtigar seemed well suited for the office. Staunch and unwavering in his support of the Queen, he was unrelenting, incorruptible, and ingenious, all agreed, and very wealthy in the bargain. Rhaenyra had dire need of such a man, for she found herself in desperate need of coin. Though the crown had been flush with gold upon the passing of King Viserys, Aegon II had seized the treasury along with the crown, and his master of coin, Tywland Lannister, had shipped off 3/4 of the late king's wealth, for safekeeping. King Aegon had spent every penny of the portion kept in King's Landing, leaving only empty vaults for his half-sister when she took the city. The rest of Viserys's treasure had been entrusted to the Hightowers of Aldtown, the Lannisters of Castley Rock, and the Iron Bank of Bravos, and was beyond the Queen's grasp. Lord Celtigar set out at once to redress the problem, To do so, he restored the selfsame taxes that his ancestor Lord Edwell had once enacted during the regency of Jaehaerys I and piled on many a new levy besides. Taxes on wine and ale were doubled, port fees tripled. Every shopkeeper within the city walls was assessed a fee for the right to keep his doors open. Innkeeps were required to pay 1 silver stag for each bed in their inns. The entry and exit fees that the Lord of Air had once assessed were brought back and tripled. A tax on property was decreed. Rich merchants in their manses or beggars in hovels, all must pay, depending on how much land they took up. Not even whores are safe, the small folk told each other. The cunt tax will be next, and then the tail tax. The rats must pay their share. In truth, the weight of Lord Celtigar's exactions fell heaviest on merchants and traders. When the Valerian fleet had closed the gullet, a great many ships found themselves trapped at King's Landing. The Queen's new master of coin now assessed heavy fees on all such before he would allow them to sail. Some captains protested that they had already paid the required duties, taxes, and tariffs, and even produced papers as proof, but Lord Celtigar dismissed their claims. Paying coin to the usurper is proof of naught but treason, he said. It does not decrease the duties owed to our gracious Queen. Those who refused to pay, or lacked the means, had their ships and cargoes seized and sold. Even executions became a source of coin. Henceforth, Celtigar decreed, traitors, rebels, and murderers would be beheaded within the dragon pit, and their corpses fed to the Queen's dragons. All were welcome to bear witness to the fate that awaited evil men, but each must pay 3 pennies at the gates to be admitted. Thus did Queen Rhaenyra replenish her coffers, at grievous cost. Neither Aegon nor his brother, Aemond, had ever been much loved by the people of the city, and many King's Landers had welcomed the Queen's return. But love and hate are 2 faces of the same coin. As fresh heads began appearing daily upon the spikes above the city gates, accompanied by ever more exacting taxes, the coin turned. The girl that they once cheered as the realm's delight had grown into a grasping and vindictive woman. Men said, a queen as cruel as any king before her. One wit named Rhaenyra, King Maegor with teats, and for 100 years thereafter, Maegor's teats, was a common curse amongst King's Landers. With the city, castle, and throne in her possession, defended by no fewer than 6 dragons, Rhaenyra felt secure enough to send for her sons. A dozen ships set sail from Dragonstone, carrying the Queen's ladies, her beloved fool, Mushroom, and her son Aegon the Younger. Rhaenyra made the boy her cupbearer, so he might never be far from her side. Another fleet set out from Gulltown with Prince Joffrey, the last of the Queen's 3 sons by Laenor Valerion, together with his dragon Tyraxes. Prince Daemon's daughter Rhaena remained in the Vale as a ward of Lady Arryn, whilst her twin, the dragonrider Baela, divided her days between Driftmark and Dragonstone. Her Grace began to make plans for a lavish celebration to mark Joffrey's formal installation as Prince of Dragonstone and heir to the Iron Throne. Even the White Worm came to court. The Lysan harlot Mysaria emerged from the shadows to take up residence in the Red Keep. Though never officially seated with the Queen's small council, the woman now known as Lady Misery became the mistress of whisperers in all but name, with eyes and ears in every brothel, alehouse, and pot shop in King's Landing, and in the halls and bedchambers of the mighty as well. Though the years had thickened the body that had been so lithe and lissom, Prince Daemon remained in her thrall, and called upon her every evening, with Queen Rhaenyra's apparent blessing. Let Daemon slake his hungers where he will, she is reported to have said, and we shall do the same. Septon Eustace suggests somewhat waspishly that her Grace's own hungers were slaked largely with sweetmeats, cakes, and lamprey pie, as Rhaenyra grew ever more stout during her days in King's Landing. In the fullness of her victory, Rhaenyra Targaryen did not suspect how few days remained to her. Yet every time she sat the Iron Throne, its cruel blades drew fresh blood from her hands and arms and legs, a sign that all could read. Septon Eustace claims the Queen's fall began at an inn called the Hog's Head in the town of Bitterbridge on the north bank of the Mander, near the foot of the old stone bridge that gave the town its name. With Ormond Hightower besieging Longtable some 30 leagues to the southwest, Bitterbridge was crowded with men and women fleeing before his advancing host. The widowed Lady Caswell, whose lord husband had been beheaded by Aegon II at King's Landing when he refused to renounce the Queen, had closed her castle gates, turning away even anointed knights and lords when they came to her seeking refuge. South of the river the cook fires of the Broken Men could be seen through the trees by night, whilst the town sept sheltered hundreds of wounded. Every inn was full, even the Hog's Head, a dismal sty of a hostelry. So when a man appeared from the north with a staff in one hand and a small boy on his back, the innkeep had no room for him, until the traveler pulled a silver stag from his purse. Then the innkeep allowed that he and his son might bed down in his stables, provided he first mucked them out. The traveler agreed, setting aside his pack and cloak as he went to work with spade and rake amidst the horses. The avarice of innkeeps, landlords, and their ilk is well known. The proprietor of the Hog's Head, a scoundrel who went by the name Ben Buttercakes, wondered if there might be more silver stags where there had been one. As the traveler worked up a sweat, Buttercakes offered to slake his thirst with a tankard of ale. The man accepted and accompanied the innkeep into the Hog's Head's common room, little suspecting that his host had instructed his stable boy, known to us only as Sly, to search his pack for silver. Sly found no coin within, but what he did find was far more precious, a heavy cloak of fine white wool bordered in snowy satin, wrapped about a dragon's egg, pale green with swirls of silver. For the traveler's son was Maelor Targaryen, the younger son of King Aegon II, and the traveler was Sir Rickardthorne of the Kingsguard, his sworn shield and protector.